Welcome back to the On Adventure podcast. I'm Josh Self, and I will be your host today. And my guest today is John Norwood, a banker by day in Raleigh, North Carolina. But what you'll find out very quickly is that his other persona that he spends his time doing is coming up with one adventure after the other in and around the area that he lives in, North Carolina. John's not one to look for places necessarily around the globe to explore. He feels that there's plenty of resources and plenty of places to explore that he hasn't touched just in his home state of North Carolina. I really enjoyed the conversation. Not only did he describe the different places that he's been and the adventures that he's planning, but he also did a great job of explaining why he does it. What does he get out of pursuing these things and planning the details of the trips over and over again? So without further ado, enjoy my conversation with John Norwood. You know, we're jumping right into it with the conversation, which is awesome. I do want to start by welcoming you to the On Adventure podcast, and I'm looking forward to kind of where this conversation meanders. But I always like to start with giving you a chance to introduce yourself to folks listening. So, who are you? Where are you? And maybe something interesting about yourself.
All right, I'm John Norwood. I am in Raleigh, North Carolina. Been here since '95. I'm a native North Carolinian, born and raised in Charlotte. Grew up much more centrally located in the state, so I am more attracted to the mountains than I am the coast. I like them both, but growing up, I have so many different memories of going to the mountains because it was so close to Charlotte. My wife, 2 kids. Both the kids are grown and out of the house, so that has allowed me to have a lot more time to do some adventures and explore some things that had been dormant a bit from way back when.
All right, very
And
cool.
yeah.
So let's start there with the family, and it'll become obvious when we get into it, like all the different things that you are planning through the years that you get into now. But did you do were you that active in the outdoors and pursuing adventure in your life when the kids were in elementary school or growing up? What did that look like?
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, it looked a bit different doing things with kids than with adults on various adult type things. Probably know how that is, but
Yeah.
sure. I mean, we were always out on parks. We did camping with the scouts. Both my kids were involved in scouts. We went trips with them. We went on adventures with them. During vacations, we would always find a place to hike or a waterfall to see. So I feel like I introduced them, and my wife also loves the outdoors, and so that's always been a part of our family. Even for our honeymoon, we spent a lot of time outdoors. We spent our honeymoon back in 1995, and half in Asheville and half in Cashers. And we must have seen, I don't know, more than a dozen waterfalls. We went on a quest to see as many waterfalls as we can, different hikes. Really enjoyed the outdoors and enjoyed the mountains during the honeymoon. It was a great time. But yeah, it's the only dreaded thing that my kids have dreaded, but now maybe appreciate a little bit, is the dreaded Christmas hike on Christmas Day.
What
On
is, so tell
Christmas
me a little
Day.
bit more about that.
No, it's just simple. Sometimes, kids can be resistant to getting outside and hiking around, but day like Christmas, you've had too many sweets and you've cooped up inside and going a little bit stir crazy. So we made a tradition of fixing that right after lunch, going out to a local park, mostly Umstead or someplace like that, and or the extensive network of trails around lakes and rivers we have in town, greenways, and taking a few miles of a hike. When they were really small, they could bring their skateboards and bicycles so they wouldn't have to walk on their own. But a great way to burn some some of that Christmas energy.
Yeah, that's good. Get out in the cold air and move around a little bit. And
Exactly.
Raleigh is really fortunate with the amount of the trail system that runs through. There's miles and miles of paved greenway, but a lot of single track between greenways and around lakes and and then up around Falls Lake with the Mountain Sea Trail running through there. It it's you kind of have your pick, which is a bit unusual, I think, for many other cities at its size. So that's pretty cool.
Oh, sure. That and within a very short driving distance, there are all sorts of different trails and activities. I'm not into mountain biking, but there are a lot of mountain biking trails, either official or non-official, where so some people I know go and enjoy all that. Not for me, but not and beyond just the trails, we have a couple of really nice lakes, Falls Lake, Jordan Lake, where another part of my adventure, not necessarily overnight, is I've gotten into sailing.
Hmm.
My father-in-law had an old 14-foot sunfish, which is basically a paddle board with a sail on it. Uh,
Okay.
so in his garage that he had bought in the early 70s, and a friend of mine in Chapel Hill happened to be interested in getting into it, and he bought one, and then I came across that one from my father-in-law who wasn't using it anymore, and we learned how to sail, which was enormous amounts of fun.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, that if you're talking about adventure, being on, those sunfish, you can basically fit one person, maybe two. So it's a little tight with two, especially if you're full grown.
Uh-huh.
That is great fun. It takes about as long as a round of golf on a Saturday. I'm not a golfer at all. I would much rather be doing anything else, such as sailing.
Anything else?
Yeah, and even in the wintertime, we've learned how to gear up. We wear dry suits,
Yeah.
which is basically what from always all everybody's familiar with the wetsuit, but I really hadn't run across the concept of the dry suit. You just basically dress up like you normally would with some insulating layers, and you zip this waterproof shell over your clothes, and it has booties, has neoprene wrists and neck, so the water doesn't get in, and it's amazing. We've sailed around in water in the high 40s, low 50s with as the water temps, and with air temps of in the 50s, which is
Yeah, that's chilly.
sounds unbearable. I
Yeah.
mean, it sounds unbearable. I mean, it is chilly and it sounds unbearable, but with you being dry like that and layered up, it is great fun. And the wind is better in the wintertime than it is in the summertime. I never
Okay.
noticed
Yeah.
the seasonality of wind.
Yeah.
Never cared about that.
Do
Yeah, I
you
haven't been.
do this on Falls Lake or where do you take
I
this?
do it. See, we kind of go back and forth whether we're sailing together, or if I'm sailing solo, I'll go up to Falls just simply because it's closer.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm sailing with my buddy Chris, we'll go over to Jordan Lake, or sometimes we'll go back and forth. I haven't ventured out farther than that, but gracious, those lakes are, the supply the water for the triangle, and
Yeah.
they're very large and plenty of places to explore.
Do you find one is more crowded than the other?
I don't. Both of those lakes are managed by the Army Corps of Engineers.
Right.
They have a protective buffer around them, meaning different from the lakes that I grew up on in Charlotte, Lake Wiley and Lake Norman. There are no houses around Falls in Jordan. And so that definitely cuts down on the traffic. But yeah, seasonally, June, July, August are not necessarily the best times to go out there because it is so darn crowded. But at the same time, the wind is not as
Hmm.
strong typically during those months anyway, unless you're, right before or after a storm. But yeah, it can get choppy out there with all the boats going around. The wind, at least the waves are somewhat predictable, but you have a few big boats crisscrossing, and that makes for a for a condition that is a bit beyond my skill level. In those sunfish, they get knocked over fairly easily. They're meant to knock over. I mean, if you have a typical boat and it capsizes, that's a spells disaster. But the sunfish, I've I've knocked that thing over many times, and all you have to do is just swim around to the bottom of it, put your knee on the keel and or the dagger board, and it pops right back up, and you
Hmm.
crawl back in. I mean, the deck is maybe 3 or 4 inches from the top of the water. It's
I gotcha.
a lot of fun.
Yeah,
A lot
not
of fun.
much different than a paddleboard.
Not much, really not much difference.
Yeah, my only experience wearing a dry suit was a long time ago on a river in Alaska, on a glacial river. So the water was like 34
Yeah,
degrees, and that is wild. That's a wild experience to be, have water hitting you and completely dry on the
yeah,
inside. The only problem was that
right.
the face is not covered. And so I recall one moment that our boat hit a swell, and I was sitting on the front rowing, and a wave of water as we went down in this gully came over and smacked me right in the face. Felt like I'd been hit by Mike Tyson. I mean, it was
Oh yeah,
brutal. And I kind of,
and it felt like
stunned.
fire.
Yeah, it stunned me, and I kind of started falling out of the boat. And my uncle was sitting behind me, and he grabbed my life jacket and pulled me back in. But body wasn't cold; it was just the face
Right.
that got hit by it. So,
You feel it. You feel
yep.
it. Yeah, I very rarely get into any adventuring out of state, but I did maybe, gosh, it's probably been 20 years ago. Me and a friend hopped on the plane and went out to Seattle to see another one of our friends. We were all grew up as children together. He was he started his career as a bush pilot in Alaska.
Oh wow.
You talked about Alaska that made me think of
Yeah.
this, but he started out as a bush pilot for Alaska, and now he works for Alaska Airlines, but he still has all of his contacts and friends in Alaska. And he told Charlie and I, he said, "Hey, come on up, and we'll put together an adventure trip. We'll put together a fishing trip, hiking trip, big time in Alaska." And so we went up there, had an absolute blast.
Oh
We
my
went,
gosh, I bet.
yeah. I am not a fisherman at all, yet if it's on a guided trip or with somebody who knows what they're doing, about every 5 to 8 years or so, I like to go out on a fishing trip. And so we went out and we fished for halibut.
Hmm.
And we caught the small ones. They were only 35 to 40 pounds, which, being a guy on the East Coast, that's a,
That's a giant
and
fish.
and a yeah, all the fishing that I've ever done really has been on lakes and streams and things like that. But yeah, that's a giant fish. Apparently, they get to be as large as, I don't know, 200 pounds or more. But our guide knew that we were in no shape to try to deal with that. We were just out trying to have a good time and catch a few fish. But we were we were in an area of Alaska where it was water, but the mountains were coming directly out of the water.
Yeah.
It was absolutely beautiful. And there were some kayakers and there were some places you could get on the beach. And I told the guide, yeah, and it was sometimes it would be a little bit rough in the water, but I told the guide that, hey, I bet I could swim over there if we sank the boat or something. He said, no, you can't. He said that water looks fairly still, but it's actually flowing really, really quickly. And the other thing about that water is, even though the air temperature, we were up there in July, even though
Mhm.
the air temperature is very comfortable, that water is so cold that if you were to jump in that water within about 15 seconds, you would lose a lot of mobility in your feet. And after about a minute, maybe 2 minutes, your arms are going to shut down and you're going to sink down. So no, obviously we all had life jackets, but that, you
Wow.
know, I just wasn't aware of how dangerous cold water is,
Well,
especially,
yeah. I mean,
combined.
East Coast, you don't worry about that. Cold water is,
No,
50 degrees or something like that.
right, right. I mean, North Carolina, East Coast, you don't really have all of that. But yeah, we had a great time. We had to get on some airplane, some of those small
Mm-hmm.
six-seater airplanes to hop around the islands to the different places we went to and hiked. And we you have to be careful of the grizzlies. We didn't go hunting for them, but when we did hike on some of the islands, we, all carried shotguns. I probably couldn't even hit a bear with a shotgun, but we all carried them, made us feel tough. Not sure if I could know how to use one, but we had those around. Didn't encounter any grizzlies, thank goodness. But yeah, being up there is a whole different environment than anywhere around here. But I just don't get out of state. I don't know. I don't know if it's
Tell me more about that,
time
because
or
I have interviewed several people that, yeah, obviously some people like going around the world and seeing the different the differences between geographies, but I've talked to several people that are like, I'm gonna adventure local, and there's plenty local,
right.
and a lot of the people are actually in North Carolina. There's enough in North Carolina to keep you busy for a while. So is what's behind that for you? Is it an intentional decision? Is it really just logistics?
I mean, it has to do with logistics and it has to do with time. I would love to go around the world. There's a lot of places in Europe that I'd love to have some hiking trips and in Ireland. But and out west, I mean, there are so many national parks that I haven't seen that I'd love to go
Yeah.
through. I am going to cross the Grand Canyon someday. I haven't gotten up the gusto to apply for a permit to do that, but I am going to do that someday. But it's just impractical with the amount of time that I have. I when you add on the travel time
Yeah.
with the adventure time, it just doesn't make sense for me in most cases. I have heard of people who spend a day or two traveling and organizing and getting where they're going just to spend 1 or 2 nights outside and then
Hmm.
travel all the way back, renting cars and getting rides and all of that. I mean, good gracious, I'd rather maximize that time outdoors doing what I want to do instead of dealing with travel. So, I mean, gosh, just travel enough to drive to the mountains from Raleigh, especially some of the far mountains, like what's the name of that? The Joyce Kilmer area where they have those old growth trees. But that's 5 hours is a lot, but
Yeah.
yeah, there's so much to do. I even feel a little bit awkward going out of North Carolina. We will venture up to
Like
on
you're cheating
this.
on your home state or something.
Right, right, right. But and that doesn't necessarily even make sense from a distance standpoint. If you have a compass and you draw a circle around Raleigh, there are plenty of places in Virginia that are much closer than a lot of places in South Carolina. You know, just haven't explored much up there. One of
Mm.
our favorite trips, however, and it is in fact in Virginia. It's the Grayson Highlands.
Oh yeah.
That's that's a big favorite. In fact, that was my son's first backpacking trip.
Same
When
for me. That's
yeah,
the first place I went backpacking with my son.
yeah, it's a classic. Went up there. I don't know how old he was. He was maybe 12, maybe 13, something in that area. But the scout troop wasn't all that active in backpacking, but did do some trips. He just remembers it as this magical place where, vast open spaces and this one scene in particular where you're so high up and but below you you see mountain peaks and the clouds come in and it looks like the mountains are coming up out of an ocean of water,
Mm.
but it's really the clouds surrounding, the thick clouds filling up the valleys
Yep.
with the mountains coming out of them. Absolutely gorgeous. And the wild ponies, you know, stomping around that I figured out
Hmm.
later are not as wild as we thought they were when we first saw them. But I saw them up there and he really enjoyed that. And you don't often in life have a chance to go back and recapture a memory in the past and relive the past because it's always different. It's always, moving on. It's no longer there. But
Hmm.
a couple years ago, my son's almost 26 now. A couple years ago, we had the chance to go back and do a 4-day 3-night trip in Grayson with just me and him.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. And we relived that same experience. And it was just me and him out there. I don't know, probably went 35, 40 miles. We were all over that place. And, obviously expanded beyond what we had done before.
Hmm.
But, we saw the same views. We went to a lot of the same places. It was just a really, really good time. And just to see him think back and go to where he went when he first got into it and some of his earliest adventure experiences, that was a great pleasure for me.
Did you guys like do a loop through Grayson Highlands, or was it point to point?
It was a zigzag. It was more of a loop-de-loop more than more than a loop. We had sort of two giant figure eights connected. I still
Okay.
have the map on all trails. I can send you the itinerary.
All right.
Yeah, we went from all around the peaks, the rocky outcroppings and the
Hmm.
balds and all of that, and then we also went down to some of the streams and low-lying areas as well. That place looks like,
It's a different
somebody
world.
has, yeah, I mean, it looks like somebody has planted grass and it's,
Hmm.
mowed perfectly and all of that. But it's all natural, all wild. There is no planting grass. There is no mowing up there.
Yeah.
There's of course the horses and some livestock that might be, semi-wild and grazing up there. That
Hmm.
keeps it down. But wow, that is an absolute beautiful location. That's also a place where I take some people who are first trying to get into backpacking and they want to try it out in sort of a safe environment that's a little more adventurous than a state park or
Hmm.
something like that. And they want to be dazzled. They want to, that's Grayson Highlands is a good way to hook somebody.
Yeah,
They go
it
up
does
there.
dazzle, and it's easy to get to. I mean, you can drive right up within a
That's right.
mile of the trail and park and you're on it. And in that mile, it's like you get transported. I almost don't want to talk it up too much and let the secret out, but there's a lot
Right.
of people in North Carolina that I've talked to that have never heard of Grayson Highlands, and it's so close
That's right.
and just so different than most of the other mountain areas that are accessible. So that's very cool.
Right. Right. Oh yeah, yeah. And I took, like I said, that's perfect for a new backpacker. I took
Mm.
a group of about, I don't know, 9 guys up there 2 years ago who hadn't done backpacking before. Probably 7 of the 9 had not done any backpacking before, and wanted to make it fun. So I did, just 2 nights, 12 miles in total. Just hiked everybody up there. We got some elevation. People's physical condition was a wide spectrum of that. Everybody didn't quite have the right gear, but it was okay. It
Yeah.
was warm summer months, not very far, nice campsites. We spent a lot of time in the campsite, you know, building fire or chit-chatting or hanging out, and they really, really had a good time. And it was a sort of a low key high adventure type
Hmm.
situation in Grayson.
Yeah. I want to back up a little bit. You are not an outdoorsman in your day job. So is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. I am a commercial banker. Worked for North State Bank. I've been in banking since 1992 in one way or the other. Started out at Bank of America for 17 years, and I've been at North State for almost 16 years. I do commercial lending in the Triangle area. I Day job is about finding local businesses who are interested in community banking, bringing them in and helping them with their deposits, their treasury management services, their lending needs. And that's
Yeah.
what I do.
So
I manage a
it,
team of
it,
people who do the same thing as me.
got it. And not always, but banking and adventure outdoors aren't necessarily, close mates many times. But is this something? I guess I want to rewind a little bit more and talk to you about what where this all started. Like, is this
Yeah.
outdoor pursuit something you just did as a kid and carried over, and banking just gets in the way from time to time, even though it pays the bills? Tell me what that has been like, what your early years were like.
I mean, sure. So I, grew up as a kid in the late 70s and 80s. And fortunately, even though I lived in town, there was a lot of space around us, a lot of undeveloped land, some creeks that ran through, some woods that were in between subdivisions that were fairly large. Of course, they don't look quite as large now when I go back to that, but when I was a kid, they were just, vast woodlands. My friends and I would spend our entire weekends in those woods building forts, damming up the creek, doing all the stuff that the kids do. Did that for years,
My
and
kids used to do.
and well, that's right, that's right, that's right. Well, a lot of them still do that if they have the a place to do that.
Yeah.
You know, Spent enormous amounts of time out there. We even had a fireplace in one of the forts we built.
Is that right?
We were we were fairly safe. We never
Fairly safe.
uh, you know fairly safe. Nothing ever got out of control. But in addition to that, I'm first generation city boy in Charlotte. All my relatives and my parents came from um, Union County, which is just southeast of Charlotte. And you drive through there today, it's not the same place as it was 40 years ago. But you know grandparents had farms, their friends had farms, so I would spend a lot of time down there, on the
Mm.
weekends and whenever, exploring and walking around in those woods as well. And we'd spend the night out there sometimes with my cousins, and that's how I grew up. Never did any hunting though. It
Mhm.
was more about exploring and stomping in the water and going through the woods and having a good time outside. And then that translated into the Boy Scouts. Got involved in the Cub Scouts, hated it, dropped out. But then when I became Boy Scout age, I got more interested in it. And a friend of mine was in the Scouts, and he was talking to me about all these fun things they do. And I said, "Gosh, that's not my memory of how Scouts was." And so I visited, tried it out a little bit, fell in love with it, geared up. My dad had some old backpacking equipment from the 60s, and I used some of that, to get started, which was fine.
Mhm.
And I really loved it. That particular troop was Troop 79 in Charlotte, Carmel Road Presbyterian Church.
Mm.
They were very active in outdoor adventures. They had something going on every single month of the year.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
it was a standing weekend. I can't remember which weekend it was, second weekend of the month, or something like that. It was a standing weekend. If something, got in their way, like Fourth of July or Christmas or something, they would arrange it or rearrange it. But they did backpacking tours, all sorts of things. It was not a museum intensive scout
Mm.
troop. It was an outside, outdoors, high adventure intensive scout troop. I really got into it and saw, and since I've been an adult and kind of gotten back into it, I've seen a lot of the same spots that I saw as a kid, from Charlotte, but with the scouts. And, you know, enjoyed that when I, went to college. I, didn't really have time for any of that, and I completely shifted around, although I did still do something from time to time. One of my favorite college adventures was going up to West Jefferson and paddling down the New River. We would did several of those trips. Brought some folks up there. We would rent the canoes from Zalew's Canoes. I think they're still around, and they made it real easy. We didn't have canoes or anything like that. We just went there, rented the canoes from them. They would set us in right on the New River, and we would put all of our gear in black hefty bags with twist ties. Not very effective, but that's the that was we didn't have
Whatever
dry
works.
bags, you know, and we'd float down the river and camp along in different places, and they'd pick us up, you know, 2 or 3 days later and bring us back. Everybody really liked that. That was what I did in college. But I didn't get back into a lot of outdoor adventures other than just maybe a little bit of hiking until my son got into the Scouts,
Mm.
and I went on some trips with them. I pulled out, that was, gosh, I don't know, 2005-ish. I pulled out all my vintage early to mid 80s backpacking gear, from the attic, which had been, mostly melted from the attic heat and crumbling apart. But, I put it together and it was pretty good.
Mm.
Fortunately, I was younger and stronger back then, and I was able to carry the weight of the 1980s style gear. Not the case anymore.
A little
You
lighter,
know,
lighter weight now.
right? Thank goodness for new products that have come out that are just as good but a lot lighter. Definitely easier on a older person's hips, knees, all of that, heart, everything else. But yeah, I enjoyed that, and over time traded it out. Didn't have a whole lot of time to do much outside of that though, with the Scouts and sort of casual things around here until the kids got into high school and college, and it allowed some more time. And so I really, everybody talks about mental health these days. I feel like I needed a break and some alone time and recharge time. You have all the stresses, and this is the same story you hear over and over again.
Mhm.
You feel all the stresses of life. You got the job, you got the family, you got all these things going on. You're in front of the computer. You're trying to get some exercise, but still, you go on vacations and things, but that's not the same. You know, I'm at the same time social, but at the same time, I very, very much value my alone time. I always have. People say, "Hey, if you're alone, or do you get lonely?" Never. I I need solitude. I need
Mm.
periods of solitude. That helps me recharge. It helps get my mind off of whatever's in front of me. And I feel like I needed some more of that. And my wife being very cooperative, she's not as interested in getting out there in the absolute backcountry wilderness as I am.
Mhm.
She's
Mhm.
more, she does get out there, but she likes a few more conveniences and
Mhm.
civilization. So, but she's a trooper. But so I started going out on trips on my own, which was, it was extremely dangerous, but it all worked well. I planned well. I told people my wife where I was going. I gave her all the itineraries that I had, and she was very cooperative and let me go out and do those things. And it was so helpful. You come back, you're refreshed. You've been out there. You physically you feel good. You've blown out all of the stiffness in your body, and you know you eat better on the trail, you eat less on the trail,
Mhm.
because it's, you have to carry it all. I really, really enjoyed it. But even while my daughter was still at the house, I did do some of that as well related to my son. My son went to college at Lenore-Rhine in Hickory, and he was the kickoff guy for all 4 years.
Oh, cool.
He was a soccer player growing up earlier, and then he transitioned into field goals and kickoffs, a little bit of punting. Wanted to see how far he could get. He got an offer from Lenore-Rhine and went there. And their conference is that area. It's in the Hickory to Asheville to Eastern Tennessee,
Mhm.
geographic area. And so, obviously we would go to all of his home games with the whole family. Wife and daughter would go up there, see him at the home games. But, sometimes the away games were a little bit too far to get everybody and do that. And besides, with 11 games a year, it's
That's a
it'll
lot.
wear you out. It is. But I had I had this book that I had gotten for Christmas, 100 Classic Hikes in North Carolina by Joe Miller. Gosh, it's probably 15 years old now, but it shows all of the different hikes, not the best hikes, not the longest hikes. It's just that he curated a list of of hikes in North Carolina that were between 1.5 miles and 10 miles, and showed them on a map. And it's just an excellent guidebook. And so when I would go and see my son on away games, I would say, okay, are we at Mars Hill? Are we at, in Jefferson, Tennessee, or Carson Newman? Where would those games be? And I would not stay in a hotel. I would find some local place to camp, whether it was in
Oh,
a
okay.
park or whether it was maybe a little stealthy sometimes. But I would find that, and then I would pick, you know, 2 or 3 hikes to do while I was in the area. I mean, gosh, it's a little bit rough to drive, 4 hours to do a 5 mile hike. You can see how that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I was on an absolute mission to get through all of these 100 hikes in this book,
Did you
and
check them all off?
I did. It took 11 years.
Oh my gosh.
I checked them all off, and each time that I did one, I circled the number on the map, and then on the pages where it describes what the hike is, I wrote down the year that I did it and who I did it with, and any sort of notes that I might have written down. And so it's a blast to flip back through it. But yeah, whenever I went and saw an away game, I would do that. It's not a father son experience going to an away game, because basically I go up in the stadium, watch the game,
Hmm.
and I'm able to spend maybe 15 minutes with them after the game before they all load up back in the bus and head back to Hickory. So I really didn't have anything else to do while I was there. I couldn't be with him. Not how that works, but and so I would just for the rest of the weekend, either before the game, after the game, and sometimes I might take a day off and just hit as many of those hikes as I could. And as you would imagine, the vast majority of the hikes in this book are in the mountains, or in
Hmm.
that area, not
Hmm.
too far from where he played his conference games. And so that's why I got a lot of them checked off.
Yeah. I mean, that's
But yeah,
a cool way to do it. Like you almost couldn't help yourself to explore, like it's the overlap. You're doing the thing to go be with your son and show support for what he was doing. But it was like, like since I'm here, I might as well, take advantage of the location. And that's really cool. And it kind of to me sounds very similar to like your childhood. It's like, well, family has a farm. Since I'm here, I might as well go
right.
explore a little bit. And so I can see how it ebbed and flowed for you. Like any of us, you go to college, you start a professional career. It's somewhat all encompassing, starting a family at that point, but it's come your adventure side has come back out in the last little bit, and now it seems like it's just flowing out of you. And we haven't even gotten to these things, John's big adventures that you plan.
Yeah.
I don't know, what is it, 4 or 5 or 6 times a year?
Yeah. So, at some point in time, for safety reasons and social reasons, I was going all these trips by myself, and I would plan these trips. I'm a big planner. I'm a goal-oriented hiker. I like to do the plan and achieve the plan. All the hikes, I didn't do half of them. I didn't. I attempted some in my book, and I
Hmm.
may have, for one reason or another, had to turn around.
Hmm.
That didn't count. To
Okay.
count it, I had to go back and do the whole thing. And so, I would do that. And so it involved the backpacking trips involved fairly extensive planning. had to find the place, had to figure out where to park, had sometimes the shuttle, sometimes, all the meals, what the conditions were. And so I would make my own itinerary. And then I got to thinking, gosh, are there some other people who might enjoy coming with me? And so I started reconnecting with some old friends that I hadn't, that I had, you still see them from time to time and say hello or something, but I had lost touch with a little bit, and then it turned out that they were interested in doing the same thing or were interested in learning about doing the same thing. And so that is how I have built a group of folks who join me on some of these adventures.
How many do you usually
And
have?
we normally have, we have as little as one or two. We've had, I'd say on average, 5 or 6
Yeah,
is
that's a
sort
good
of
group.
the average number. We have had as many as 9 or 10, but I'd say average somewhere between 4 to 7 is most typical. And they say, "Gosh, Johnny, thanks so much for planning all this, all these details, all the figuring out where to go and the itinerary and the maps and on and on and on." But I mean, I'm not doing anything for the group that I hadn't done for myself and that I wouldn't do if I was going there by myself anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no more work for me at all. All it is, and with the job and with the family and with other things going on, I have to plan and reserve weekends or periods of time in
Mm-hmm.
advance,
Mm-hmm.
or else I won't be able to do it. You know how your calendar is.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to plan it in advance and reserve the weekend or the week or what have you, months in advance, I might as well share it with everybody. And so they can put it on their calendars if they want to consider to go. Because, most people are booked up months in advance with various things they have going on. But you get something on the calendar 2 months from now or 6 months from now, there's a better chance that you can
Make it
actually,
happen.
yeah, get it done.
Yeah.
Get it
So,
done. So
do you still do solo adventures? I'm curious how the group effort feeds your soul compared to the solo efforts.
yeah, I found that, well, to answer your question, a lot less, a lot
Okay.
less. You know, I have these trips and pretty much if for some crazy reason nobody else wanted to go, I would continue, I would
You
go.
still go.
Right? I would still go. You know, we have rearranged the dates due to, some kind of weather event or some other sort of thing where I wouldn't have gone anyway.
Mm.
So but so it is fairly rare nowadays for me to go alone, just simply because other people, at least one or two, want to
Mhm.
go. And I've found that, even when you're in a group, there is so much time that you have when you're out there that you are alone,
Mhm.
that does the trick for me.
I see.
We don't necessarily stick together when we're hiking. We hike at different paces. We try not to get too far apart, but you're alone when you're hiking. We're not always chit-chatting and talking about this and that. We're spaced out. I mean, we can go for miles without speaking,
Mm.
which you're alone there. And when you're at your tent site, we tend to disperse a bit when we're out there, if the campsite allows for that, if it's
Mhm.
not some sort of geographic, spot where there's only a few tent sites close together, we spread out.
Gotcha.
And you spend a lot of time setting up your tent and setting up your space there outside of group time.
Let me get to maybe a little more intangible or difficult question to put a finger on, but what do you what do you think you get out of these? What is it truly that you're getting out of these adventures that keeps you going back?
Well, I believe it's a lot of things. We've talked about doing multiple things at once. and being efficient in the things you do, that is not a one answer question
Mm-hmm.
at all. I mean, it checks a whole lot of boxes for me. One thing is the physical fitness part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So you've heard this many times. It's hard to exercise and stay physically fit and active if you have no ultimate goal other than being physically fit and active.
Mm-hmm.
How can you motivate yourself to go out and hike 10 miles at Umstead? How can you motivate yourself to, really focus on eating right? I need more than just the idea of staying reasonably fit. I need a goal. Say, okay, hey, I'm going on a trip where, this weekend I'm going to be hiking 25 miles with a lot of topography changes, and I'm be carrying, 25, 30 pounds. And, I've got to be able to handle this because,
Mm.
there is no car that can pick me up. If I'm on my own, I have to, I can't go out there and hurt myself because I'm not in good condition.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to be able to physically perform to get me there and back. And or if I'm with a group of folks, well, I can't be the guy who's can't can't make it and has to bail out or has to
Yeah.
have my friends carry my stuff or gets all winded and can't make it. You can't do that. I've got to stay motivated, and gosh, that helps.
Mm.
I mean, when it's cold or rainy or you feel tired or whatever, gosh, if you don't get out and get some exercise and if you don't, eat a little bit better, you're going to embarrass yourself or even worse, put
Get
yourself
hurt.
in danger.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's very, I feel like that's healthy, and I need that goal to motivate me to stay in physical shape. And the other one is just like I said earlier, the mental health part of it. My gracious, when you're in the rut of your life, it seems like things come so close to you and you can't see very far, and all you can think about is what's right in front of you and the situation that you're in. Your perspective starts to flatten out, and how it is. But getting outside allows me to, you know, see farther. It allows me to the blood flows better to be, and it's different spending 2 or 3 days doing that versus say 2 hours or
Mm-hmm.
or 30 minutes at home.
Yeah.
I'm completely immersed in it, whether alone or with other people. And I've heard of a lot of other folks say the same thing about taking a mental break. They get involved in activities that require their entire focus.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend of mine who drives race cars,
Mm.
the VIR in Virginia. I had never done any of that, but he says, he has a very stressful job and all these various things. But when he's in that race car and he's going around the track and trying not to, get out and spin out and all of that, it requires 100% of his focus and attention all the time. He thinks of nothing else. And that's a lot of times how it is.
Is it
I'm out
that
in the
way for
woods.
you when you're in the woods?
It is. I mean, of course, I do think of various other things going on, but predominantly it requires focus on what you're doing in the present at that time.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things you have to pay attention to, and it just absorbs you, and that's just very cleansing for me. Navigation. Some of these places are marked, some of them are not marked. In wilderness areas, just kind of good luck to you. You have to not get lost. You have to figure out, which turn do you take? Where do you take it? Look at your map, look at your GPS, find your way. I've gotten lost plenty of times with, maps, GPS, technology, on and on and on. You can make certain assumptions, and or your mind might wander. You don't pay attention. All of a sudden, you're 2 miles in the wrong direction somewhere. Dealing with water. Water is generally available, but there may be big sections where there are no streams, there's no lakes, there's no water sources. So you got to focus on that. You got to focus on eating to make sure you clean up right. Eating is not just opening a bag and chowing down. You have to prepare the food. You got to get it out. You got to clean up afterwards. You have to make sure you're cooking in a spot where it's not going to attract animals in the middle of the night. All of that. You got to focus on that, and just the climbing and descending, and you're breathing hard, and you're just focused on getting up that hill. So yeah, it's I think mostly about the absolute present and what I'm in, and I'm try to be as observant as possible of the things around me, the views, the trees, the rocks, the not slipping on the rocks. If you do stream crossings, that's really dangerous when it's flowing fairly fast and you're trying to cross over mossy rocks knee deep. That's you got to focus on that.
Yeah.
And that is so refreshing to me. It gives me a whole different perspective, and that perspective that there's more out there, there's a beautiful world out there, that carries over for weeks afterwards. It's not just when I'm out there. It changes my mental outlook for weeks afterwards.
Like a nature afterburn almost.
Right.
Yeah, so
Other people get the same thing from their hobbies or different things, sure.
Yeah, but I mean, what you're describing is the modern world is fairly unique in the amount of stimulation that we're exposed to, especially in, having the benefit of being in the United States at the time that we are. There's something everywhere all the time, and certainly our smart devices have exacerbated that. There's a lot good that has come from that, but you don't have any of that in the outdoors. You don't have that. The stimulation goes down to a minimal level. And, I think also in terms of like task switching, your brain is in a normal day, you're task switching, I don't know, millions of times from a notification on your phone to somebody just walked in your office to you got to respond to that email. I mean, just it's exhausting just to think about it. But when you're hiking, it's much more single-minded. When you're standing on top of a mountain, it's much more single-minded. And, it to me, it almost seems like, well, that since the dawn of humanity, we've done that more times than we haven't. Like this idea of stimulation overload is fairly recent to the human species. And so I'm totally jiving right with what you're saying that you get out of being outside, and that is the drawback. I'm impressed that you've integrated it so well, that you do it so consistently, because I haven't gotten to that point. But if you could say a couple other things maybe about when you are out there in that kind of single-minded focus, what else do you experience? What else are you feeling in those moments? And it could, just be a sense, or is it more spiritual to you in moments? Tell me a little bit more about what that's like.
It is spiritual, especially when I'm stopped and looking at a beautiful view from a mountaintop, or sitting beside a river that's flowing, or a waterfall. It's I try to be as observant as possible and really take a moment to take it all in and observe what's around me. It's a beautiful creation. It is absolutely beautiful, and I feel like we were meant to be in that more than a lot of us actually are in those environments. It shows that there's something out there that is different than what man has created for himself.
Yeah, it's
There
interesting.
are right there. Yeah, that's a house that is made for us instead of the house that we make for ourselves and rooms and ways we decorate our houses and furnish our houses.
Hmm.
It's just a different living condition that's provided for us out there, and has always been provided for us out there since the beginning of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you keep going back to this word too. You observe, you're paying attention to. And when your brain isn't task switching and putting the energy into that, you're capable of observing and paying attention to the moment. And, so again, like that's really cool to hear how that has played out for you. And I think you're hitting on a very consistent thread that I hear in a lot of these conversations of what is it that draws people back to the challenge and to the difficulty at times, but to the expansiveness of something much bigger than ourselves and much bigger than our normal day to day. And so I think you've done a great job of that. And what to kind of wrap us up a little bit, I would love for you to maybe describe some of the things you're planning in the next year or two with your big adventures.
Well, sure, sure. Well, can I give you this one other interesting tidbit?
Yeah, yeah, bring it on.
Still on the observation thread there. So I have a sleep trick. In our lives, you go to bed, you might be tired, but your mind is absolutely
Yeah, yeah,
racing.
yeah.
You can't
Yep.
you can't fall asleep. You got all these things you're thinking about. You're trying to focus on all these things that they're bothering you. You can't sleep. I have found a sleep trick that ties in to hiking. There's one hike in particular that I do most. It's a 7 mile Sycamore Trail loop in Umstead.
Yep.
I've memorized that hike. So if I'm
Okay.
ever having if I'm ever having trouble falling asleep at night, I just hike that hike in my head.
Oh,
I
wow.
drive I drive through the park, and I park pretty much the same spot. I start the trail, and in my mind, I'm going down that trail, and I see the roots and the turns and the creeks, all the parts of it, the bridges. Josh, I have never finished the hike. I have never finished it. So
That's
sometimes I
that's
get
really fascinating though. Like again, you take it back to just being single-minded and
right.
the brain doesn't go back to the task switching and your body relaxes and then you don't
I
finish the
don't think
hike.
about those other things. All the things that are racing through your mind, I don't think of those because I'm focused on looking for all those clues and signs in as great a detail as I possibly can as I'm moving through.
Hmm.
And then I'm out. No, no Tylenol PM, no, no melatonin, none of that stuff. And
Just the
I
Sycamore
hope that
Trail.
can right. I, I really hope that continues to work because that's been great for me.
Hmm.
Been great for me. But yeah, so upcoming adventures here, right? So I like to put together about 4 to 6 of them a year, according to how many I can fit in. The one coming up here at the end of February, 1st of March is going to be a classic long weekend backpacking trip. It's going to be somewhere in the mountains. I have been searching for a place. Hurricane Helene has brought this terrible, terrible devastation, and I've called ahead to park offices and ranger stations, talking to see if the places are open. Last I checked was probably a month ago, and the closures are rampant all over the place. It's bridges are washed out, trees are down. You know, if you've ever hiked in a hike after a really big storm where trees are down, that's just an absolute mess because you're off trail constantly going around this 80-foot tree that's fallen down, bushwhacking around it. That's no fun. But there's a lot of that. The roads the forest roads, the forest bridges washed out,
Hmm.
unstable. You can't get to these places. I know a lot of work is being done out there to restore all that, but really first things first. I mean, it- it's so much more important for people to be able to get to their homes and
Mm-hmm.
places of business. All of that infrastructure was washed out and destroyed as well. So as it should be, resources are going first towards restoring that, and then after it's going to be toward restoring forest roads and recreational places. So I'm scrambling around a little bit. Worst case scenario, we'll pivot and do something a little closer, or head north into Virginia.
Oh, there
The,
you
the
go.
storm
Maybe that's the
didn't.
opportunity.
Right. Jefferson National Forest, I
Mm-hmm.
think, is up there. The storm went up and then took a western turn, and it didn't do a lot of damage in sort of mid-Virginia as much as it did in North Carolina. So those are some options. I'll need to explore some things. You know, the Appalachian Trail is certainly a good option there, although we generally try to stay away from the Appalachian Trail because it is so darn crowded.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, they have the most resources of any other trail system. And so there are hundreds of trail maintenance workers out there
Yeah.
restoring the Appalachian Trail and
Yeah.
access to it and all of that. But we prefer to go to the other places. So I have that coming up. And then I have in late March, early April, not all the trips are backpacking trips, right? I mean, that's sort of my favorite one of them, but we do other things besides that. We're going back for the second time to Cape Lookout National Seashore. That's an island off the coast of, I guess, a little bit east of Morehead City. You get there by ferry. I have a Jeep Wrangler that I drive every day, a 1994 Jeep Wrangler, my daily driver, and keep it in great shape. But we did this trip last fall. Took about 7 four-wheel drive vehicles and about 8 or 9 guys. We went down there, hopped on the ferry. They dumped us off at the island. There are a few amenities on the island. There is some running water. It may or may not be able to be trusted, and a few things there. There's a lighthouse. And we just piled our Jeeps and trucks with everything we needed, coolers and all of that,
Can you
and
drive
spent
right
three
onto
days.
the beaches there?
You drive right on the beach. The
Oh, that's
the
cool.
island the island is about 20 miles north to south and maybe, I don't know, 1 mile wide east to west. You can camp wherever you want on the beaches. Obviously, stay off the dunes. You can't drive on the dunes, of course. You can't walk on the dunes, but there are sections of beaches where the dunes kind of come out onto the beach, and there are sort of places of beach behind the dunes where it's flat and it's okay to camp. So we just do primitive camping out there and drive all around. There are old fishing houses, and there's a lighthouse and all the various buildings around that. There was a community there way back, and you can explore all those houses and old homesteads there. Some of the guys do fishing. I was gonna try that as well, do some ocean surf fishing, but we were so busy driving up and down the beaches and carrying on. And there are trails through the dunes, that's sort of the back road that you go to as well. And there are sort of bog areas where it's muddy and you drive your vehicles through it and
That
just
would
have
be
a great
fun.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I brought out the Dutch oven, cooked some Dutch oven suppers. We all ate out of that. That was great fun with the charcoal and the cast iron and all of
Mm.
that, and made some really nice peach cobbler
Mm.
as well. I'm getting hungry thinking about
Oh
that.
my gosh. Yeah. Jeez.
I mean, it was just great fun. We did a base camp, camped at the same place both nights. Set up tarps, had magnificent bonfires. You can do that below the high tide line, but no development. I mean, you're at the beach. The beach looks exactly like it did, 1,000 years ago. There's
That's
not
cool.
one sign, yeah, not one sign of any development or any man-made structure anywhere. And yet there you are. So going back there, and then the other one we have planned is the week before Memorial Day. We're going to do a long hike, sort of a repeat of what we did last year. Last year we did the Foothills Trail, which is about a 70-mile trail that starts in South Carolina, goes up to North Carolina, goes back to South Carolina, I think between the Ocoee State Park in South Carolina and the Table Rock Park in South Carolina. It's it's south of the Appalachian Trail, but we had, 5 guys go on that last year, and we did a bunch of side trips and side hikes to destinations near that off the trail. So we probably did 80 some miles over 7 days, which was quite
So
physically demanding. But
that's a lot, yeah.
we're looking to do the same thing, but not exactly sure. My desire is to go to the eastern part of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. There's a lot of good things to see over there, mountains to climb, very backwoods there. I'm trying to put an itinerary together in that area, but I just did hear back from the national park and maybe 3 weeks ago, and they said, yeah, some of those campsites are open, some of them are closed. You can't access a lot of it, so you'll just kind of have to wait and see. We're working hard, but it's they've closed a lot of it down just for safety reasons. A lot of the bridges have washed out,
Mm.
and the stream crossings, normally it's okay to do stream crossings, but some of the stream crossings, due to the volume of water that went through there, some of them are deeper than they used to be,
Oh, wow.
and there's a lot of brush pileup that you just can't. You can imagine how dangerous that would be to try to cross over a brush pile with a lot of really fast moving water. And if you do have a problem, they can't get to you
Mm.
because it's to get the you know 4x4 vehicles out there or anything else. It's become more inaccessible than it was before. So they're working so hard to fix all that. But we are going to find a place, even if we have to go back, to Grayson or string something together on the Appalachian Trail or somewhere in Virginia. We're going to take about 6 days and go out there. I've been using my Garmin InReach,
Mm-hmm.
which is the GPS device, and I use that to, for emergency purposes, but also it's a two-way satellite text communicator to where for all the people who are at home, wife, kids, family, friends, you can send out a text message and then it has a link to your
Like your
beacon.
your geolocation where you're at.
Right. And so they can click on the link on their phone or computer, and they can see not only exactly where you are, but they can see your trail. And every period of time it drops a breadcrumb, or it does a little ping to the satellite
Mm-hmm.
that shows your location, and you can, at home, you can track, where we are and where we've been and kind of see what's what. And also, something I leave back and share around is I use an app called All Trails,
Mm-hmm.
and I pay for the subscription part of it, which allows you to create custom maps, and that's how we navigate. So I share the
Yeah.
maps around. It's fairly easy to make a custom map of your itinerary, so you know exactly where you are. You can pull it up on your phone. It has the map there. It has your route laid out instead of following a paper map, which we do sometimes bring paper maps as well as a backup plan, especially in the more unmarked remote places, the redundancy of navigation. But that's how I find my way around. And so I'm itching to put a map together for this 6-day hike but I have not done that yet because I haven't nailed down a location
I gotcha.
that's suitable.
Have you ever used the Gaia app?
I have explored it a little bit, but I found that All Trails was for me easier to use.
Does All Trails have like crowdsourced updates to water sourcing and things like that?
It not as much as probably Gaia does, or some of the other Onyx does, or some of these other gut hooks.
Gut
So
hooks, yeah,
not
yeah.
as much as some of those other ones. It has reviews, and where you can review, you can look at reviews of different places, but it's not very technical as far as advice from other people.
I gotcha. Well, that's cool. And I will keep an eye out for an email from you for when you do get the
Yeah.
details, and would love to make it happen to come join you on one. And we'll get our
Oh,
friend Mr. Black to get out there and hike a little bit too. He's always
oh
looking for
yeah,
a
yeah.
reason to do that.
Well,
So
he's been a big talker. I just need to see him, actually out there.
there we go. I'll let him know that you threw the gauntlet down. He's got to show up now.
That's
So,
right. That's right. Yeah,
uh,
no, I'm looking forward to getting out there. It's been a long, cold winter, but
yeah.
ready to get out there.
Well, John, I appreciate you taking the time on this Friday morning, and this, I could talk about this stuff all day long, and
Right.
certainly have learned a lot from listening to you. So I really appreciate you being generous with your time and doing this.
Enjoyed it very much, and like I said, I'm looking forward to seeing you. Hey, the mountains are right in between, for where we live, and great place to meet up.
Absolutely. All right. Okay. Man, I really enjoyed that. I hope you did as well. The next one will be coming at you in a couple weeks, so stay tuned. Until then, I hope you have your own great adventure.